Okay, it's TeamStrub day 27, and I'm here in Las Cruces, New Mexico, with Dawn Starostka. Dawn, can you introduce yourself? Tell us what you do.
I am Dawn Starostka. I am the regional director here for Big Brothers Big Sisters Mountain Region, serving Doña Ana and Grant counties.
Okay, great. And Dawn, how long have you been in this role here in Big Brothers Big Sisters?
Officially about 6 months now. It's been a whirlwind 6 months. I'm pretty new to this, but pretty excited about what I'm doing.
Okay, and obviously the chapter has been here for a while, but let's talk about in 2014 there was some tumultuousness. I don't know if that's a word.
We'll go with it.
Yeah, just talk about how you came to be in this position and where the organization is right now.
Sure. And it's interesting when you say this organization, because this organization is a new organization, essentially. What used to exist here in the southwestern part of New Mexico was Big Brothers Big Sisters of southwestern New Mexico. And they, as you referenced, went through some really rough times last year. Some state funding issues came up, changing in formula, holding back up some funds, and the local chapter was pretty reliant on that funding without a full kind of good mix of funding sources. And it really impacted the program. Roughly a year ago, we were looking at closing the doors. Staff were being sent home, matches were being closed. It was a really bad place. I don't like to dwell on the past, but at the same time, it's important to recognize it was really rough. And so we can look a year from now and see where we're going to, we can look a year from where that was to where we are now and know we're in a better place. And to look a year from now will be even better. We merged with the Big Brothers Big Sisters of Northern New Mexico as of January 1st and formed a whole new organization. It's a lot of Big Brothers Big Sisters, but Big Brothers Big Sisters Mountain Region is where we are now, and so we serve 17 counties in the state of New Mexico, with serving about 1,100 kids as a bigger agency. Here in Doña Ana and Grant County, we're only serving about 100 kids. But it's been a rough ride for the program, so I like to think we're on a rebuilding track.
Sure.
Ask me again in a year and it'll be a whole different story.
And you guys are obviously accelerating. You know, you're seeing growth month to month. Talk about what you do in your role, you know, in terms of being the forward-facing voice of Big Brothers Big Sisters, and talk about a typical week, you know, for you.
Typical, there is no such thing. As a regional director, I am focused on the outside. Everything I do is outward toward the community is really where I am. I am the recruitment person. I'm out recruiting bigs for our program, volunteers. I am the fundraising person. I put on our events. We did 3 events this year. We'll do 2 next year. So doing the fundraising events, getting sponsorship, getting teams signed up, getting people involved, all the logistics. I write grants. I look for individual donors in the community. I wear a lot of hats in a small office. I'm responsible for a lot of that. So a typical week is not typical at all. In 6 months, I haven't figured out what a typical week is. It depends on what the priority is and what opportunities came up. This week has turned out to be very much a recruitment week. Having you here, being out in the community, I've been doing a lot of speeches at local banks, so it's been very much about recruitment. Next week I probably need to rein myself in and work on our mud volleyball tournament that's coming up in September as a big fundraiser. So I kind of walk that line constantly of oscillating between our recruitment activities and our development activities. I have a grant that's due by the end of the month, so that has to factor in someplace. It's a constant juggling of those activities to make sure we're getting the human resources that we need in the terms of volunteers and the dollars resources that we need to fund the program.
And you talked about the long-term goal. We went to a Rotary lunch this afternoon. It was fantastic, and Dawn did a great presentation, which I streamed on Meerkat, by the way. You can add me on Meerkat, and we'll put that up right here. But you talked about how, refresh my memory on the number, you said you're at 100 matches now, and you're shooting for 10% of the population that's in need, so about 800?
800, yeah, that's an interesting statistic. Right now we have about 100 matches that going on here in Doña Ana Grant County. Our executive board at a retreat in March came up with some neat numbers, and neat being scary. Their goal is 10% of the children living in poverty in the region we serve. So for Doña Ana County, 10% of the kids living in poverty is 800 kids is what we would shoot to be serving. That is a lot of kids to serve, and I know I could find those kids. I know they're out there. Finding 800 volunteers to serve those 800 kids is where it gets really tricky. This program at its strongest here locally was at 250, 300, a little over 300 matches. So it's not inconceivable at all to get to those numbers. It's just a matter of being out there and letting the community know there are kids that need us and we need volunteers to get there.
Perfect. And let's segue that into the role of a volunteer. You know, we were speaking about how it is a major commitment, that you're looking for at least a year-long commitment from a big. So talk about the process of becoming a big, and talk about the commitment that's involved, when you do commit to do that.
Sure. Well, and it is a commitment. I try to stress that very heavily. There's a child that's relying on you, and I use that soup kitchen analogy. I could show up and chop onions this month and not show up for 6 more months, and that's fine. Somebody else will do it. But when you have a kid counting on you, you can't just come and go as you want. And so I'm very firm with that. We ask for at least a year commitment, which for an older adult is okay, but for a college student, sometimes they may not be here that long, and so we really push that. What we ask for is for our volunteers to spend 4 to 6 hours per month with the child. Some months are more, some months are less. We understand that, and to be involved for at least a year, because it takes a long time for that relationship to really cement, to get to that trust level. That's true of any human interaction. And so we really want to make sure someone's going to be here. Now that's the minimum is a year. We've had matches, we just graduated 2 that have been together 4 years and 6 years. They've aged out of the program, but they're friends for life, and that's what we really ultimately want. To become a volunteer, you go to our website and click on an inquiry form, and I'm sure you'll put that up, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And then our program staff will call and set up an interview. And that first interview can be anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half. The goal is really to get to know you as a volunteer. What do you like to do? What kind of personality do you have? What are your interests? How much time do you have to give? Are you more comfortable with a certain age level or not comfortable in a certain age group? So we're going to avoid that for you. Do you have any special skills that you'd like to share? All of those kind of things to really get to know you. And then we do a full background check and criminal history, your fingerprints, the sex offender registry, because it has to be safe. If we're sending a volunteer out on a one-to-one basis, it better be a safe match. And then we get the fun part. That's all the hard stuff. Then the fun part is making the match. I say we, but I don't get to do it. The program staff do. To really look at you and say, hey, this guy's great. He likes to travel, obviously, and he likes to run, and these are cool things. We've got this kid over here that's really interested in learning about this, and to make that match. And they sit down and introduce you and kind of let you get to know each other for a little bit, make sure parents are comfortable, and voila, a new friendship has at least started. Now, it takes a little work to get there.
Now, one thing that, just to touch on it briefly, you mentioned the fingerprinting aspect of it and how that can slow the process down a little bit. Something specific here in New Mexico that maybe you've seen me speak to a number of different directors around the country, and this is the first time I've heard of that sort of requirement. So talk about how that impacts your ability to recruit and
yeah, that's a really big challenge we're facing right now. Is our fingerprints are taking anywhere from 2 to 4 months to come back with their report, and it's required by one of our grants that we have at the state level that we have the fingerprint background check part done. So I get a volunteer who comes in and is so excited and wants to be matched and wants a little brother or a little sister, and we have to say, that's great, hold on for a couple of months, and as soon as we get that, we'll get there. Our executive director at our northern part of our office is working on some solutions at the legislative level and working with our executive board, so we're hoping there'll be some movement here soon. I have 29 volunteers in the queue right now. I think probably 18 of those we could match today if we had their fingerprints. Everything else is done. We're just waiting for those fingerprints. So it's a frustrating thing to know we're that close to making another match and we can't get there quite yet. So it's a personal challenge that we have. We have our goals for the year, and by golly, we want to make them, but it's hard when we got the volunteer, we just can't match them yet.
Sure. I wanted to ask you about the community here in Las Cruces, and specifically about the bilingual nature. We're pretty close to the Mexico-United States border. Not exactly sure how far.
About 50 miles.
50 miles, okay.
Yeah.
About 50 miles north of El Paso is where
right?
we are, right?
And that's right there with Mexico.
So a big element is matching bilingual adults or Spanish-speaking adults with Spanish-speaking kids and vice versa. So talk about how that's a unique challenge here in this community.
Well, it's a challenge, but it's also kind of a blessing for what we have. We are very much a multicultural community. We are about 80% Hispanic, and a beautiful blending of the two cultures. And throw in a lot of other mixes as well, but it's very much celebrated in the Mexican-American tradition here, and that's who we are. We have families here that have come over, they're first-generation American, and a lot of times it's very typical in a border community like this for the parents not to speak English. The kids do. We get them in the ESL programs in English as a second language. Sorry, probably not an acronym everybody else uses, into the schools, and you get those kids speaking English, and they learn so quickly when they're young. But we have parents that aren't there yet. They've come over from Mexico and they don't speak English. So it's really nice when we can find bilingual volunteers to be able to communicate with the parent. They're going to be okay with the child, and that's great, but when they can speak with the parent, that just adds to the relationship. And of course, on our staff, we have 2 staff members that are bilingual, and so we always have them here to help facilitate, but it's nice when we can do that. We've partnered very recently with a group of young adults. They're kind of those up-and-coming leaders who are first-generation Americans themselves and have really kind of made it. They've come up through the school system, they've gotten their education through New Mexico State, and they're doing some neat jobs now, and so they want to give back, and they're all bilingual. They're, like I said, first-generation Americans, and so they want to partner with us. They're all trying to get into the program, so we'll have them all as bigs, and we can really use them to pair with parents that might make them even more comfortable about putting their child in the program.
Great. Well, this is such a wonderful organization. Again, this is the 3rd chapter of Big Brothers Big Sisters that I'm visiting with this summer, and that's no coincidence that this organization really does some awesome work. So let's tell the people of this community where they can get more information about becoming a big, how they can get in touch with you, and hopefully help you find some bigs.
Sure. Our website is www.bbbsmountainregion.org.
Put it right there.
All right, it's nice and long. Our phone number is 575-523-9530, and anybody who answers can get you on the right place. And my newly named Facebook page, thank you.
There you go.
You gave me a little skill I didn't have, is www.facebook.com/BBBS Doña Ana, which is DONAANA.
It's right there. So
All right,
you'll
there you
be
go.
Right on the,
In
right
case
on
you can't
the
do the
video
tilde
there.
on the end, but that's okay.
There
We know
you
it's
go.
there.
Dawn, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time today. And so we're going to edit this video together. We're going to get some Snapchat questions, and then tonight we're going to head over. We're going to get to meet some of the bigs and littles, and have some fun at the farmers market right here in Las Cruces.
Yeah, our Las Cruces Farmers Market on Saturday mornings is huge, and last summer they started one Wednesday night a month doing an evening farmers market, and it's a huge success. So it's a great chance for you to see the community at its finest and hang out downtown when the weather's a little cooler at night, and it'll be fun.
Great. So if you want to see some of that, we're going to put their Facebook page right back up here. It's facebook.com/BBBS Dona Anya, right? I got
there
it.
you go, yeah.
With a little Anya, right? Or you can check out my Instagram, Facebook page. We'll throw that stuff up there as well. So it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks for being here.
And we'll continue the conversation
right.
here off the GoPro. Thanks.
Great.